3 p.m. car local time for Panorama News. I'm Nسرين Bهاء, and we start with the headlines. The Cabinet discusses plans to start coronavirus vaccination campaign. The global death toll of the coronavirus reaches 2.5 million. The U.S. warns that patience on Iran talks not unlimited. Welcome back. Time for the news in full. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli headed the weekly cabinet meeting to discuss a number of important social and economic files. During the meeting, the Prime Minister gave his directives to form a ministerial committee to ease the procedures of property registration and notary offices. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister stressed the necessity of following up the procedures for registering the names of the elderly and chronic disease patients in order to receive the coronavirus vaccine. Minister of Defense and Military Production General Mohammed Zaki returned home after participating in the opening ceremony of the 15th edition of edX 2021 exhibition in the United Arab Emirates. On the sidelines of the exhibition, the Defense Minister met the Emirati State Minister of Defense Affairs Mohammed Al-Bawardi. Defense Minister Zaki also hailed efforts exerted to hold the exhibition this year despite challenges witnessed worldwide during coronavirus pandemic. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said Egypt is dealing with the issue of migration with a strategic vision that balances between special considerations as a state of source, a destination and a crossing point for migrants in the same time. Shoukry was speaking during his participation in the opening session of the first regional conference to review the global compact for safe, orderly and regular migration in the Arab region, which is held via video conference. Shoukry said that Egypt's strategic vision is in line with the articles included in the Global Compact for Migration. He noted that Egypt deals with migration in a comprehensive approach that takes into consideration the developmental dimension and recognizes the causes of the illegal migration. The Egyptian Drug Authority granted emergency license to 2 coronavirus vaccines in the framework of the vaccination campaign against COVID-19. The vaccines are Russia's Sputnik 5 and South Korea's imported AstraZeneca. The authority approved the 2 vaccines after undergoing the assessment needed to prove their safety, quality and efficacy according to local and international standards. The move brings to 4 the total number of vaccines approved by the authority for urgent use against coronavirus after the earlier licensing of China's Sinopharm and the British-produced AstraZeneca vaccines. Egypt reported on Wednesday 644 new coronavirus infections, bringing the total number of cases to 180,051 people since the outbreak hit the country in mid-February last year. The Health Ministry also reported 52 new deaths, bringing the total number of fatalities to 9,804. The ministry added that 389 patients were discharged from hospitals, rising the number of those who have recovered to 139,072 people. Coronavirus has caused at least 2.5 million deaths around the world since the outbreak emerged in China in December 2019. This as EU leaders meet on Thursday under pressure to speed up Europe's coronavirus vaccine rollout and divide over border closures and what introducing vaccine travel certificates could mean. More details with the following report.
A real-world study found the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine highly effective at preventing COVID-19 in a potentially landmark moment for countries desperate to end lockdowns and reopen economies. In Europe, Chancellor Angela Merkel said that new variants of COVID-19 risk a third wave in Germany. Germany has administered only 15% of the AstraZeneca vaccines it has available. the Czech Republic must tighten measures to combat the pandemic and prevent a catastrophe in hospitals in the coming weeks. Sweden stepped up pandemic restrictions to avoid a third wave, while France's government ordered a weekend lockdown in the Dunkirk area to arrest an alarming rise in cases. Italy's government will extend restrictions already in place until after Easter, while Switzerland announced the first phase in a cautious easing from restrictions. Britain said it was confident in manufacturers' timely supply of vaccines to keep fueling one of the world's fastest rollouts despite a slowdown this week. However, Greece will not be able to lift lockdown restrictions in the wider Athens area next Monday as planned. In Asia, India announced an expansion of its vaccination program, but warned that breaches of coronavirus protocols could worsen an infection surge in many states. In Americas, the United States expects to roll out 3 to 4 million doses of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine next week, pending authorization from the FDA. Meanwhile, in Africa, Ghana receives the first shipment of vaccines from COVAX, a global scheme led by the World Health Organization and the Gavi Vaccine Alliance, among others, to procure and distribute jabs for free to poorer countries. South Africa could spend up to 19.3 billion rand over the next 3 years to vaccinate most of its population.
EU leaders meet on Thursday under pressure to speed up Europe's coronavirus vaccine rollout. Leaders are divided over border closures and what introducing vaccine travel certificates could mean. The video summit for the leaders of the 27-nation bloc comes a year into the COVID-19 crisis, and most of the EU is experiencing a second wave of cases or a third wave for some that stubbornly won't diminish. And the member states now face outbreaks of more contagious variants from Britain and South Africa. Brussels has warned 6 governments, including Germany's, about unilateral border restrictions, while tourist-dependent countries are piling on the pressure to lift travel barriers in time for summer vacations. U.S. Ambassador to Libya Richard Norland called on Speaker of Libya's House of Representatives Aqila Saleh to convene a session as soon as possible to approve the new executive authority. A tweet on the embassy's official account said that Washington stressed on the importance of the House of Representatives' vote of confidence for the new authority as a key step toward holding the elections in December. Saleh called on the government to respect the outcomes of the Libyan political dialogue and Cairo declaration. The United States warned Iran that its patience is not unlimited and renewed an offer for Tehran to resume talks on its nuclear program. Iran publicly has insisted on its position that the United States need to lift all sanctions before Tehran returns to compliance to the nuclear deal. More details with the following report.
U.S. President Joe Biden's administration said Wednesday that its patience is not unlimited with Iran as it renewed an offer for talks on its nuclear program. The United States on February 18th offered to meet with Iran under the auspices of the European Union in a bid to revive a nuclear deal trashed by former President Donald Trump. State Department spokesman Ned Price said that this is an urgent challenge, referring to Iran's steps out of the compliance with the deal in protest against Trump's sanctions. Price told reporters that their patience is not unlimited. He also added that the U.S. believes, and the President has been clear on this, that the most effective way to ensure Iran could never acquire a nuclear weapon was through diplomacy. That is what they are engaged in now. The White House press secretary said separately that the United States was still awaiting Iran's response to the European invitation for a meeting. Iran publicly has insisted on its position that the United States needs to lift all sanctions before Tehran returns to compliance. The Biden administration last week took symbolic steps, including reversing Trump's widely dismissed stance that the United Nations had authorized the new sanctions on Iran, but said that the talks are the best way to resolve all issues. Iran this week began limiting the International Atomic Energy Agency's access to sites and other information in response to the U.S. refusal to lift sanctions immediately. But in a compromise, Iran agreed to a temporary technical deal that IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi said gives the watchdog necessary degree of monitoring and verification work.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said on Thursday he had fired the head of the General Staff of Armenia's armed forces after the military called for his resignation in a statement. Pashinyan has faced protests and calls to resign after what his critics say was the disastrous handling of a 6-week conflict between Azerbaijan and ethnic Armenian forces over the region of Nagorno-Karabakh last year. Pashinyan has rejected calls to step down on Thursday. He called on his followers to rally in central Yerevan to support him. Moving to Myanmar, supporters and opponents of Myanmar's military clashed on the streets of Yangon on Thursday as authorities blocked students from leaving their campus to march. The country has been in turmoil since the army seized power on February the 1st and detained civilian government leader Aung San Suu Kyi and much of the party leadership after the military complained of fraud in November election. There have been about 3 weeks of daily protests and strikes, and students pledged to come out again in the commercial hub of Yangon on Thursday. At the same time, about 1,000 supporters of the military gathered for a rally in central Yangon. The confrontation underscored the volatility in a country largely paralyzed by protests and a civil disobedience campaign of strikes against the military, which many professionals and government workers have joined. Meanwhile, Facebook said it had banned the Myanmar military from using it and its Instagram platform with immediate effect. Venezuela on Wednesday expelled the European Union's ambassador to Caracas in response to new sanctions, giving the Portuguese envoy 72 hours to leave the country and raising the bloc's renewed ire. Foreign Minister Jorge Ariaza announced the move against Ambassador Isabel Pedrosa 2 days after EU foreign ministers agreed to sanction 19 Venezuelan officials for undermining democracy. In Brussels, the EU demanded Venezuela reverse its decision. The EU spokeswoman said the bloc profoundly regrets this decision, which will only lead to further international isolation of Venezuela. Well, that ends the political review of the news of the hour, and I leave you with my friend and colleague Shireen Aidel with more news, sports and economy.
Good afternoon, Nusreen. Good afternoon.